Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. As global power balances shift, business and security are increasingly intertwined. The upcoming Trump-Xi meeting at APEC 2025 and the war in Ukraine continue to test the resilience of global trade and alliances. How are these geopolitical tensions shaping markets, transatlantic relations, and the future of NATO? Joining us is Andrew Hollenhorst, an economist and geopolitical analyst, to discuss US-China relations, the war's economic ripple effects, and Poland's growing strategic importance within the transatlantic alliance. Andrew, welcome to TVP World. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, my pleasure.
So APEC's coming along, Asia-Pacific Economic Council, I believe it's called. Cooperation, beg your pardon, at the end of this month. Xi and Trump are getting together. What's the meeting on the sidelines? What do you think's on the agenda for those conversations?
I think trade is an important issue between the two countries. Of course, China, one of the largest trading partners for the U.S., and this is something that the Trump administration focused on in the first time in office. Now we're in the second Trump administration. Continues to be a focus, and continues to be a focus for the markets also. We're really looking for what type of a deal is going to come out of this. How much de-escalation can we get from these trade tensions that really escalated? You go back to April, we had a big escalation in trade tensions, a big sell-off in the equity market. Now the expectation is that something positive is going to come out of this meeting.
What would you consider to be a positive outcome?
I think you want to see movement in the right direction. We don't really know how much of a fully fleshed out trade deal we're going to get out of this meeting, and we probably won't. There are some smaller items, things like soybeans, for instance. The U.S. typically sells large quantities of soybeans into China, so some commitments on soybean purchases in future years. That would be a small issue where there could be some kind of agreement. Now, the larger issues really are, how are the U.S. and China going to handle their trade relationship going forward? Can tariff levels come down from their current rates that the U.S. has imposed? Those are all things that we may find out about at this meeting, but we may be waiting for longer to find those details.
Well, Trump has always complained about trade balances being out of kilter, and of course China is one of those countries that Trump has a problem with. Have tariffs made a difference to that balance in trade?
Well, we have seen actually a lot of volatility in the trade data, in the imports that are coming into the U.S. related to tariffs. But most of that so far has been really just strategically front-loading, moving imports around in time so that they're not affected by the tariffs. In the first quarter of this year, for instance, we saw lots of pharmaceuticals come into the U.S., and this was to avoid potential future tariffs on pharmaceuticals. In terms of the longer-term effects, I think that's more what the Trump administration is trying to target. The idea that with tariffs in place, over time, you would have a lower level of imports coming into the country and more balanced trade.
But it's not just about economics, is it? I mean, Taiwan is a big thorn in the side for that relationship. And we expect that Xi is going to tie the two up. Is there a risk that Trump is going to make some kind of concessions on Taiwan in order to reach some kind of trade deal with China?
So national security is part of the discussion on trade, both directly in terms of, if you think about something like semiconductors, which of course involves Taiwan as well. These are technologies that the U.S. wants to have produced in the U.S. for national security reasons. When you think about how Trump is using trade policy, it's not just tariffs are being used not just to target trade deficits. It's also, like you're saying, wrapped up in issues of national security. Whether that comes into the conversation or not, I think that's up to President Trump and President Xi. But certainly we've seen in a variety of contexts where tariffs are used as a tool to move non-traded related issues.
Okay, so it's all bundled together. Now, how does the outcome of this meeting or these meetings affect EU relations with the US and with China, which is taking a greater and greater interest in Europe now?
Yeah, so this is definitely part of the consideration from the global perspective is if China is importing less manufactured goods into the US, where do those manufactured goods go? And do those manufactured goods start showing up in Europe? So that's one concern in these negotiations. Another issue is, are those imports that were coming in from China, are they just transshipped through other countries? Are they coming into Mexico and then coming into the US through Mexico? So it is a broader conversation that it brings in Europe, it brings in Mexico, it brings in Vietnam. When you're negotiating with China, it's really about the globe.
Now, this puts Europe in quite an awkward position, doesn't it? I mean, it's an important trading partner for China and vice versa. However, they're on opposing sides when it comes to Ukraine. With China supporting Russia and of course the EU supporting Ukraine. How do you square that circle?
Again, this is like the Taiwan issue. I think we don't know if it's going to be brought into these trade discussions. I think there is a possibility that this really stays focused on trade, not on these security issues. If you start bringing in these other security issues, to your point, you start bringing in issues that are divisive between countries and makes the trade negotiation that much more difficult.
Understood, but moving on from the trade negotiations, moving on from APEC, what do you, because China is taking a greater interest in Europe, how is Europe and the European Union going to deal with that conflict?
I think we're seeing different national governments respond to it differently. I think that's something that has to be worked out at the national government level. I cover the U.S. economy, so I'll just have to watch how that plays out.
Understood. Now, what about Western sanctions against Russia? President Trump has made noises about putting into place secondary sanctions. However, he's also demanded that all of Europe stops buying Russian oil and gas, and Hungary is being a little recalcitrant in doing this. How likely is it that President Trump is going to place secondary sanctions on Russia and starve their war machine?
Yeah, so we've heard this referred to as secondary sanctions. We've heard it referred to as secondary tariffs, where Trump has actually threatened higher tariffs on countries that are still purchasing oil from Russia. That's something that comes in and out of the discussion as Trump is thinking about how he wants to handle this Russia-Ukraine conflict. It's definitely something that's still on the table. You look at the trade negotiations between the U.S. and India, for instance. Russian oil has come into those negotiations as well. So I think that is something that can continue to be something that's bargained over.
Okay, so that's work in progress at the moment. What about NATO? Is that also work in progress?
Definitely work in progress. I think if you look at the first Trump administration, the real focus was getting countries to commit, other NATO countries to commit to meeting their threshold in terms of defense spending. And we have seen a lot of movement in that direction. I think that's something that the Trump administration is happy with in terms of a goal, in terms of reformulating the way that NATO is working. So I think they feel that they've made progress there. But does that end the discussion around NATO? No, not at all. Definitely a work in progress.
Okay, so what does Trump want? So that, because obviously many NATO allies are a little bit concerned that President Trump won't be there if Russia's aggression kind of goes to the next level. What would President Trump need to convince him that he should be in there wholeheartedly in Article 5, for example, enforcement?
Yeah, I think the U.S. is part of NATO. The U.S. is part of the world. I think the Trump administration recognizes that. I think Americans recognize that. In terms of what the exact threshold is, I think that's for the Trump administration to assess the facts as they apply to the articles, to the NATO articles.
Right.
But I can't guess what they're going to do.
Okay, well, we shall wait and find out.
Thank you.
Andrew Hollenhorst, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, though, lots more coming up. Goodbye.